With Azure, we have about 42 different regions where we have cloud data centers to keep this data as close to the users as possible, for both for performance reasons and also for the sovereign cloud use cases. The other scenarios where we are the use cases that we hear from customers is the need for something local. For example, people may not be as open to publicly embracing the cloud, embracing the public cloud yet, or they have certain hybrid workflows. And this is where we believe in reaching where the customers are. And to that end, we announced the availability of Azure Stack. I think that was briefly talked about in the previous session, which enables all the goodness of Azure to be available in a local footprint on the premises of customers, so they can seamlessly burst to the cloud as and when required. So the combination of Azure Public Cloud and Azure Stack, Microsoft is the only public cloud vendor who has a true hybrid story, which has the consistency of patterns on how you do these workflows both in an on-prem environment and in the cloud. So next, let's look at the life cycle of media in the cloud and what customers are looking for when it comes to doing stuff in the cloud. The first step to start the cycle is to get the data into the cloud, and especially as we know, media tends to have large asset sizes and such. And there are two categories here. One is time-sensitive data that needs to be delivered into the cloud as quickly as possible so they can be produced and distributed. And the second category is where you have not necessarily time-sensitive data, but you want in the cloud for either for archival scenarios or for other workflows and such. In the first case, we believe connectivity is paramount, right? So whether it is from remote locations or from customers' locations, with Azure, we have services like ExpressRoute, which enable customers to directly connect to Azure through private peering across hundreds of internet exchanges worldwide. In the second category, where you have your cost is a consideration, where you don't need to get it into the cloud as fast as possible, we have services like Azure Export Import Service, which enables disks to be shipped to Azure, which we can upload into the cloud. And more recently, I think late last year, we announced the availability of Azure Data Box, which are basically rugged appliances that we ship to the customer location, where they can upload the assets and ship it back to Microsoft, which we can upload into their customer's account, either for archival scenarios or for further processing. So once the content is in the cloud, the next typical stage is content production. And this is where we believe in order for content production to be viable in a cloud environment, it's extremely critical to have the key players or the partners that customers use in an on-premise environment available in the cloud today. And this is where they announced a strategic partnership with Avid that we had last year. And in fact, Jazeera is one of the earliest customers of the Avid solution on Azure for their newsroom in the cloud initiative. The other aspect of it when talking about production in the cloud is, okay, what is the ecosystem partner that we have? We have Adobe's of the world and Jellyfish of the world who are also available on Azure, so that we have a choice for customers to use different production workflows in the cloud. The next aspect of doing production is the cloud performant enough? Because today you do production in on-premise environment, you have network attached storages and such. So how performant can the cloud be? This is where the combination of Azure Stack and with the recent acquisition that we made in January that we announced called Avier Systems, which provides the industry-leading hybrid storage solution, or hybrid workflow solution, especially for rendering and production workflows. So once the when the assets are produced, the next step in the life cycle is typically a playout, whether it is linear playout over TV or OTT playout for digital distribution to deliver to all the consumers where they are. And Azure Media Services, in conjunction with a set of partners like Imagine Communications, Grass Valley, Uyala that you saw in the video earlier, along with Quellos and Next TVs of the world, provide a complete end-to-end solution for doing either linear playout or OTT playout. Another interesting trend that we are seeing in the space is the convergence of the backends. Because once the content is produced, once they're in the cloud environment, they tend to use the same common backend to do either both linear playout or digital playout. So once the playout happens, it typically needs to be distributed. In the OTT case, of course, CDN or content delivery networks are critical. We believe that no single CDN has the best performance worldwide. So we believe in having a rich set of partners that are tightly integrated with Azure that can enable customers to have a choice of picking the right CDN for the given geography for a given price to performance ratio. So this is where we have partners like Amazon and Akamai and Verizon, who are global providers, but also we have a partnership with a whole bunch of regional CDN providers. And the last but the final step, I think, which probably is going to be the most important going forward, is how cloud can enable media companies to help actually engage and monetize their audience. So this is where audience analytics and artificial intelligence come into the picture. And as you saw in the video previously called Video Indexer, this is a product that my team built. It basically helps you unlock the insights within the video and basically extract things like the speech transcript, what was spoken in the video, what faces appeared, whether they were celebrities or not, emotions, keywords, logos, brands, and such. Now imagine the possibilities when you have such rich metadata that's available out of this video. Content creators and distributors can use this to do hyper-personalization of content, and as Mr. Abwagla was talking about earlier, that is basically the future, where when you have such plethora of sources of content available, I want to pick and choose which content I want. And this is where I think AI is going to have a tremendous impact in terms of how people consume the content. And the next step is, of course, monetization. And this is where you can now, with having the additional insight into the video, you can use it to do better targeting of ads. And in fact, one of the other partners with Uyala and Zones TV, which is the customer, they launched a solution last year where they built a solution where they look at in-content signals, like in terms of which actor was featured or which logo or brand appeared in a video, and use that information to do dynamic ad insertion and sourcing the ads which had either that actor or that particular brand, so to drive up CPMs, and there seems to be incredible results. And this is where I believe this is an area where I think the cloud will definitely shine going forward, in addition to basically helping optimize and streamline the production workflows.
Excellent. Thank you very much for this brief introduction into what's going on into the media. But having said all that, and obviously we all see the trends in moving media over up to the cloud, I would imagine that there would be lots of dependencies on the network infrastructure on that. So I would like to ask Ken about the standpoint view from Cisco.
Sure.
What's the future of the network? How fast networks we will need?
Yeah, so if I can address that first by talking about kind of the three areas that we're seeing the network changes and evolution take place in. First of all, it's about the transformation of broadcast production. So both from a broadcast studio perspective, from remote trucks, and from other uplink sources, and we're seeing that move from traditional SDI to IP. So once you enable that IP infrastructure, the ability to then leverage that into the cloud to enable a lot of the efficiencies and processing capabilities that Sudheer was just talking about, that's the first thing that we're seeing. The second thing then is in terms of evolving and accelerating media operations and the content supply chains throughout the cloud. That's where, increased capacity through the data centers to enable those cloud infrastructures is important. And then thirdly, it's really about how you then accelerate in terms of content distribution and also collaboration. An important piece in the cloud that we're seeing is just collaboration, whether that's through journalists, through people who are reviewing media content, those kind of things. And then you wrap all of that on top of it with security. Because as has been mentioned up a few times, trust now as the way you're looking at it is very, very important. So how we layer that. If we look at Rio Olympics from last year, there was over 200 million attempted denial of a service attacks on the kind of NBC-style infrastructures that were out there that we were working with them on. But the Cisco security systems prevented all of that from having an impact on people being able to view and consume the content. What does that mean for the networks? With the rise in the content and the formats as we go to UHD and beyond, it means the ability to process, the speeds through these networks are more important. And also, as you replace things like SDI with IP, having low latency, no jitter, no lost packets is what's critical to it. So for us, it's a complete transformation of the IP network to be able to support the demands of broadcast and on-demand video.
So in terms of future development, is it are we going to 100G?
Oh, we'll be there. We'll absolutely be there at 100G, yeah, and beyond. If 8K comes along, which in some markets it's going to, those are going to be the needs, and especially on the broadcast station infrastructure. That's where we're going to see the need.
Very good, thank you. So having Microsoft and Cisco gave their view on this, and Miljenko, Al Jazeera did some pilot project already. What was this about, and what was your experience?
From Al Jazeera perspective, last 2 years we are really closely looking what's happening with these new technologies and all this new buzzword about the cloud and how this cloud will be change everything. Luckily, we see that it definitely will have the impact, and we immediately jump into the complete story. And last 1.5 year, 1 year, we finished a lot of pilots, proof of the concepts, and one interesting outcome from all these tests, it's a presentation which we finished last year on the IBC, where we together with Microsoft and Avid, first time in the history of the broadcast industry, we show newsroom in the cloud running on the hybrid version inside the Azure Stack. Even Azure Stack, it's been released like a few weeks before the IBC. Showing this, that this is possible, basically we close our phase of the tests and like searching ourselves what we're going to do in near future. And right now, Al Jazeera is in the phase of the final deployments. It means we have somehow finished the architecture. We know exactly what is possible, what is not possible. Like, we need to mention that we did a lot of mistakes in this 1.5 year, 2 years of the research. We changed our mind a lot of times. We lots of times go in the wrong direction, then we need to return back and do it again. Basically, we have quite long learning curve. What it's for somebody who doing the broadcast business for many, many, many years, cloud, it's totally new world. Of course, you cannot deploy the media inside the cloud if you don't know fundamentals of the media, but that this media successfully running in the cloud environment, it's a lot of homework which need to be done. And sometimes it's not easy because it's lots of new stuff. But definitely, for our near future, that means next months, maximum 1 year, 1.5 year, we're going to have the first newsroom running completely from the cloud environment. This is excluding the studio and the PCR, but all other area of contribution, the routing the video signals, archive, all these things will be run inside the cloud environment. Of course, combination of the real cloud, what is the Azure, and the Azure Stack. For example, in Middle East, we don't have any media center, any major data center in our range of the distance of like 50 milliseconds. And based on our experience and everything, like cloud, it's everything about the latency, because when you have complete installation on-prem, everything goes smoothly. You don't see the problems. But when you're talking about the cloud, it's everything about how far away, it's about the speed of the light. And this is our like main objective, how we're going to architect the next generation of the newsroom, which will happen very soon.
Fantastic. Herve, adding to this, TF1 is a big French media company, and it's fairly traditional, I would say. But also, as I hear, you are fairly digitally transformed well. So what's your experience with the cloud? Are you using any already? Or
yeah, sure, we are using it. Of course, TF1 is a very traditional kind of old-fashioned broadcaster in Europe. But at the same time, we're also number one in digital in our market. And so we use the cloud from many years now, especially for digital OTT businesses. First, as a private cloud in a data center near to Paris. A few years ago, we also had a disaster recovery for our digital platform straight onto cloud. Because at the very beginning, it wasn't a business issue for us to have a disaster recovery for OTT and digital business. Now it is. We make about 100 million euros sales on advertising on digital. So we needed a disaster recovery, and we made it on cloud. This is done. This is running well, and we are quite happy with that, with this mix of private cloud for main purpose and cloud for disaster recovery. Now we have 2 projects running. The first one is, which is probably the most ambitious for us, is to move our content. We are talking about a petabyte of content, active content, that we have to migrate from on-prem storage to cloud, knowing that TF1, since the late 90s, stored all the content on hard disk. So it was very expensive at that time using MPEG-2 technology. And few times in the 2000s, we wonder about should we stay with hard disk storage or move to LTO? And it was a kind of dilemma for us, because we knew that new technologies on disk will be cheaper and cheaper. But as the media size were getting bigger and bigger, the balance in cost was complex. Now there's no doubt in our mind anymore. We know that cloud storage will be the most efficient from economical perspectives in the coming years. So now the plan for us is to move all our content to the cloud, to the public cloud, knowing that we know the programming of our channels 3 weeks in advance. So the idea is to put the storage, all the content in the cloud, bring them back in on-prem 3 weeks in advance, because we need some media preparations, so we have to work on the media. Secondly, it will allow us to manage acceptable retrieval time and not in emergency. And also we will deal with connectivity issue, because what we realize is that one of the weakness for broadcaster with those technology is not the cloud, is not the network, but it's usually the fiber somewhere on the road, and with some caterpillar working around, and we could have a few hours of downtime, which is of course an issue for us. So this is something we will be running in 2018 to migrate all our content to the cloud. We think that first year probably we will save some money, but we don't think it will be that huge first year or even second year. It's more kind of a challenge for the future. Of course, it will depend on the level of redundancy. It's a big headache for a broadcaster. We are talking about a petabyte, so it's a kind of a few 100,000 hours of content. And even if all the cloud providers are talking to us with regions, multiple data center in a region and so on, can we take the risk of having a kind of a big mistake somewhere that will erase a lot of content? So we are still looking at some copy of the media somewhere in the data center rather on LTO. For a traditional broadcaster, as you introduced myself, it's kind of a psychological fence to say, okay, I put the media on the cloud only and not keep a copy somewhere. I can't imagine myself asking the president for an interview a morning, or the president of TF1, and saying, okay, you will not be laughing, but we got a problem with the cloud and we can't access the media anymore. It's not something we can afford. So we will probably spend some money on some over storage. And the second project we will be running is not on storage, but rather on system and computing. But especially on system, we got TF1 is very active on news. We got a news channel and also some news bulletin on the main channel. We are just investing in some new system from Dell to operate the news, and we decided with them to take the challenge to run the disaster recovery on cloud. For the time being, we are running an Avid system for the news production. And we got another building, a disaster recovery building, 10 kilometers away from our main office. And in this building, we have a studio, we have Interplay, we have ISIS system from Avid, sleeping all day long. We got it for 10 years. We've never been there for real. We've been there for training, but never for real. So it's quite a huge capital that is locked in somewhere and never used. So our challenge will be to use cloud with Dell to make sure that we got a disaster recovery that first will save money, because we will just run database and some storage, but not all services all day long. Secondly, the target is to be able to use it from any location and not in this particular building, but to say, okay, if there is a disaster, we don't know what disaster we will have to face. And so we could be moving our operational staff in different locations, depending on the type of disaster we'll have to manage with.
Very impressive, I must say, for a traditional building.
Thank you.
All right, so just to get another view angle, you know, from a vendor on the industry, so I would like to ask Shams from Dell. I mean, Dell, you've been traditionally selling servers, hardware, you know, to companies like Al Jazeera of TF1, but I would imagine that your business has changed a lot since cloud is coming, so your buyers are some cloud vendors, I would say. And what the industry is asking now from a server point of view?
Great. I do not want to dive into product, but I am going to correct that view. I want to focus on the high level, try to get a sense of this audience and make this more interesting to them and answer what is really cloud. But let me talk a little bit about Dell. Dell is not a servers company, okay? Dell EMC is a family of brands where we actually sell the entire infrastructure stack to help you build the modern IT building blocks. You know, if you imagine you running cloud, everything that we're talking about, whether it's drones to everything that the keynotes talked about, you have your cloud, you have the user application. Why are we doing all this cloud anyway? You have the user applications. Underneath that, you have the cloud to be able to service this, or IT as an infrastructure. But don't forget, underneath all of that, you have the hardware. And that hardware is servers, storage, networking, and now the industry is even more complicated. You have hyper-converged infrastructure, you have choices of different networking protocols and infrastructure to be able to use. That is Dell EMC. But Dell Technologies has other brands as well. VMware. How many of you use VMware? Let's see a raise of hands. Let me try a different question. How many of you know VMware? Raise your hands. If we don't see any raises of hands, you know, how many of you are awake? Raise your hands. Anyway, everybody knows VMware. VMware is a brand that belongs to us. That's part of our family. So we're not just a server organization, right? VirtuStream is the world's #1 B2B cloud service provider, right? So that's also part of our brand. So it's not just a server vendor. Now, let me answer specifically the question that you asked about the evolution of cloud. In our experience, working with many organizations, I think looking at the journey of cloud, one of the most interesting things is, and I listened to the keynotes as well today, and I want you to reflect on this. How many of you still think of cloud as a place? Even in the first keynote that we had, we talked about how cloud is not that big, white, fluffy thing that we think about. It's more about the servers and the rooms and the data center. But even that as a perspective in our experience is wrong. A lot of customers look at cloud as a place, somewhere to move something to, a means to an end. And oftentimes that leads to a way of thinking and a cloud strategy that is often idealistic by nature and leads to something that is tangential to what cloud really is. Bottom line, in our experience, and a lot of customers realize this in their journey, is that cloud really is an operating model. And that really changes the way that you are going to be able to work with it, right? Today, we live in a multi-cloud world. And a question that is often overlooked by organizations that tackle the cloud problem is, how do you bridge all of these multiple variety of options that are available to you, multiple operating models? So I think we're evolving into a world where customers are looking to take advantage of, as Sudheer said, hybrid cloud. That is really where customers we see are moving into, really trying to leverage the capabilities of hybrid, on-premise as well as being able to take advantage of the public operating models that are available outside. That's what we're seeing.
Do you have any customer case?
Great question. Let me think about this. So when you look at, I mean, we have a great customer story that I can talk about that I was just back from in Europe. We have a customer in the media business where, you know, the media industry is changing so dramatically. More consumers are contributing to content, right? More content is being created than ever before. And we remember this particular organization, the IT organization, was facing the challenge where the internal business functions and business stakeholders were demanding, or there was an increase of demands on what they wanted in terms of applications and development. The partners of the organization are also working in different ways, blockchain, gateways, right? All of this stuff. The security question also came up. How can we be able to leverage all of these different technologies that are emerging as well? The business management and IT management took a look at the list of initiatives that leadership was asking IT to tackle, and they realized that they're going to need a 4 times increase in investment in resources, skill sets, as well as infrastructure. The business management team actually said, let's go ahead with it. But IT realized there's another problem that we are not going to be able to tackle with investment alone. This speed of development is going to lead us to be prone to risk in human error in terms of development. The IT organization needed to be able to choose whether they focus on maintaining the lights on or focus on the business itself. They floated an RFP to start looking at cloud. And at the end of the journey, they built basically a model of IT as a service. The whole organization basically moved on to a cloud strategy. And the key things out of that, over 2 years, as a case study that we saw that was really a positive part of the story, was how they moved from focusing on maintaining the infrastructure versus innovation on the business. And we saw the customer move in their own survey 30 to 70%. So 30% of the time that was spent on the business, this was the business would say that IT is only contributing 30% to the business. 70% was spent on keeping the lights on. Next year, that survey showed 50 to 50%. And the year after, they really showed that the IT organization, the operating model of IT had changed. And they were very much 60% focused on business innovation, 40% keeping the lights on. That means the IT organization was spending more time on the business innovation, delivering the business application needs, business initiatives, rather than the infrastructure focus itself. And that's really the power of the operating model that is cloud.
I agree with you, but I think also that the media industry is getting so complex that to make a right decision, it's not enough to be good on an engineering side or on a content side or on a business side. You have to be good in all of that, right?
Or you find the right partner, right?
Right, but okay, so it depends on what kind of media organization you are. But anyway, let's move forward. I would like now to tackle the question about, there is a lot of talk about private, public, or even hybrid, I heard yesterday. So let's talk a bit about this, but let's focus on media organizations who are not only to thinking cloud for redistribution of already made content, like Netflix does that. Let's try to see from a perspective of organizations who is doing live production, daily reshuffling, refreshing the content, and all of that. So who will take this one? Thank you.
Yeah, I can give a couple of good customer case studies here. So if you're in the media business, you're talking earlier about, reliability and the service has always got to be there. I just sum that up as 5 nines. And so we deal with a lot of customers where their starting point is 5 nines availability. When you're working to 5 nines, it will drive you very, very quickly today to an on-prem solution, because that's the only way you can guarantee it with the other examples that were made earlier. Also in terms of resiliency across that and the resilient networks you have to put in place, I work a lot with, I can't name them unfortunately, but a big tier 1 in Europe, where for all of their Playout, they're running, multiple centers across different geographies, and they want to be able on a single segment of an ABR stream to be able to switch from either one of those originating points, yeah? If one of them goes down or they see bad signal to noise on that, they're going to switch and literally switch on a segment basis. That drives you very, very quickly to a very optimized on-prem cloud solution. And the other example I'd give as well is one of which I think is always challenging as vendors. If I look at the encoding space and just the media workflow for transcoding, packaging, and encryption when you're sending out streams, given that those can now be stood up in the cloud, the ability to change those is like this. Even if it's just at a quarter, let alone at a second kind of thing. It gives media companies the ability to be looking at different vendors, watching how the performance characteristics are changing, the efficiencies, the resourcing that's going on, and actually make decisions and say, right now, you know, for the workflow for this sports program, vendor A is the best one that can actually deliver on that. You know, versus on this other one, which is maybe news or something like else, they can deliver a lower vendor B can do a lower bit rate with the required quality we need. But that can change very dynamically, you know, and the cloud actually gives them the ability to stay on top of delivering, as you heard earlier in the day, the best quality of experience. It's not about selecting an encoder vendor that you live with for 4 years until the next cycle of reintroduction because you went from HD to UHD or HDR came along or whatever it was. And so I think cloud brings a couple of things. Number one, drive it to on-prem for when you've got to get to 5 nines. That's very clear, I think, with the engagements that we see today, and especially for the broadcast studio element of that. It's non-negotiable for broadcast studio today. Where Cisco is trying to help is in the origination of the content that is coming into these systems that Sudheer and others were talking about, which is coming from, you know, broadcast studios, is coming from stadiums, is coming from broadcast trucks. You know, with Arena Sport, we now do IP uploads of UHD content direct from the Premier League games. Those kind of examples where you've got to get that low latency and everything out there. And then cloud changes, as we heard before, changes the business model for everybody, whether it's the operators, the media companies, or the vendors, because the ability to change is now in the control of the user.
When we talk about high availability and 4 nines and all of this, so here I believe you guys in Microsoft already hosting like big banks and all this, so I would imagine they also want high availability SLAs, and so it's...
Yeah, absolutely. So let me talk about what we've done in the media space, right? So as you know, the media services platform has hosted multiple Olympic, Super Bowls, and World Cup soccer events and such. And especially when you're doing this scale event where you have millions of people watching it, even a second or 2 second glitch in the stream, your audience dramatically drops. So I think the design point for those type of high profile events that we have learned over the years is, even in those cases, 5 nines is a must. And when we work with NBC Sports for their Olympic events, we had active configuration of these workflows in the cloud. And again, if you look at a given single VM, of course, you might not get 5 nines. And this is where it goes back to how you design the application for the cloud. And I think if you design the application for the cloud in the right way with enough redundancy, you can get 5 nines and even more. And of course, there's a resultant increase in cost. And this is where it goes back to how well you architect the application so that you maintain the cost in a certain profile, but still get the benefits of 5 nines of availability. So we have shown that we can actually do 5 nines in the cloud with the right cloud architecture model. But coming back to the broadcast use cases, I think this is where the question whether you do on-prem or in the cloud comes back to what value is the cloud adding for you, right? So I think there is two arguments to be made. Is there an economic value, or is there new workflows that can be done in the cloud? So if you look at applications, most of the new applications that are being built, they're being built with the cloud design point. The cloud as a design point. So this is a transition that we made with Microsoft a few years back, where the mantra was cloud first, and then make sure their application runs in the cloud, because now you can seamlessly take it on-prem with things like Azure Stack and such. So all new applications that are being built are done with the cloud design point. And now, so the question then becomes, if you're going to be running stuff on-prem, can you take advantage of the innovation that is happening in the application development, which is in the ISV space or the media application space, that are all going to the cloud design point first. And the second part of it is the economics, right? So the economics is when you're doing something, you're utilizing a particular piece of hardware 100% of the time, all the time, that's all you need, then yeah, you might have, the cloud may not still have the best economics. But when you have applications that are spiky in nature, like we talked about rendering, news production, Olympics and such, and even in the case of news production, where you have high news cycles, low news cycles, you might need to have the capacity or the capability to burst to the cloud. So I think there is always this scenario where hybrid architectures are always going to be relevant. They're not going to go away. I think they're always going to be there. But I think in terms of leveraging the new innovation that is happening in the application space and AI and everything else, I think having cloud design point be integral to your overall application design is going to be critical.
Miljenko and Herve, what's your standpoint of this? Is it going to be public, private, or hybrid? And how in a traditional media organization today, this investment cycle where the lifespan of hardware is getting shorter and shorter, how this can be put in line with the cloud?
Al Jazeera, because we are really in the business of the breaking news. And imagine that some major natural disaster happened in the world and some fiber cut happened between the multiple regions and then complete network of connecting the data centers and cloud infrastructure just go away. And for us, if we depend our business on the cloud from this perspective, it's the same disaster. Because especially in these moments, our viewers expecting our signal that we give them information what's going on in the world. And that means our infrastructure need to be so resilient that in the case of any natural disaster in the world, which can have huge impact on the world infrastructure, that we can survive these things. And from this perspective, for us, it's no any doubt, definitely need to be hybrid. That means our journalists need to send the message. They need to send the message in any circumstances, regardless of any technical issues which can happen in the world. This is no doubt. Second problem about this amortization, right now, our life cycle for our equipment is quite long. It's for like normal, for studio equipment, it's 8 years. For IT, it's 4 or 5 years. But when we're talking about the cloud, the speed of development of this infrastructure, we are usually talking about the months or maximum 1 or 2 years. It means we have right now, like our business model, the way how we change the workflows in the newsroom are based on the technology which you assume that you need to replace in the 4 months. But from another side, on the social media platform, which they are our major competitors, they are based on the technology which are upgrading massively in every 6 months, every 1 year, every 2 years. It means we have really, from the end user's perspective, we need to, cloud, it's not, what we see right now, it's not about, first of all, cloud is extremely expensive. It's not the cheap. Like if somebody think that cloud, that cloud will be solve the problems, no, cloud will be create a lots of new problems that you cannot even imagine until you test and until you move there. That means if we go the way how we run the business today, if we go with this assumption to the cloud, will be definitely disaster. What we need to do complete transformation of the running the business. Like the newsroom, as we see today, need to be something, not cloud, need to be combination of the fast social media approach and the traditional journalist research approach. If we merge these two worlds, using the on-prem technology and cloud benefits, then definitely will have the huge impact on the today newsroom. If you're not doing it in this way, it will be probably a big disaster in the future.
On a budgeting and business side of the thing, so the CapEx versus OpEx model, how do you look at the cloud in this space?
First of all, we don't have one philosophy about that, because as a major broadcaster with sport, news, transmission, digital, we got probably 20 systems in our facility. And of course, the answer to public, private, hybrid, on-prem or what will be different system by system. and will be different in time. Perhaps we will answer today that we prefer to have that subsystem in a private cloud, but probably in 2 or 3 years, it's something that we will have to revisit. So I don't think for a company like us that there is one answer. There will be 10, 20 answers, and that will change over the last 10 years. Regarding investment and cycle, of course, as almost anybody else, we want to be more OPEX sensitive than CAPEX. In 2008, when the economical crisis touched us, especially the ad market, the ad revenue, we are free-to-air TV mainly, about €2 billion a year, 1.4 billion on ad. We got a minus 25% on ad revenue within a quarter. And of course, myself, I couldn't reduce the CAPEX I got. So it's a problem for the company. It was the same for the programming, the content. We have a long-term contract, and it was very difficult to drive the company when you got a very short cycle on ad and a very long on program buying and tech cost. So yes, we would like to have more OPEX than CAPEX, but at the same time, we will have to renew, for example, our control room soon. We made them about 10 years ago. The first high-definition control room we bought was for the World Cup in Germany. Not the one in Brazil, not the one in South Africa, the one in Germany, 2006. Still running, 12 years later. I will have probably to change it by next year because the supplier, I will not name it, will not give me support anymore. But the product is still very good and running. So moving from CAPEX to OPEX, also within CAPEX, we got some fear about moving from a kind of traditional broadcast industry life cycle of products to more IT life cycle of products that could, for sure, reduce the investment first day, but also reduce the duration of the amortization. And so it's why we will be very careful on when do we have to invest on IT rather than on traditional. We all know that if we can draw our overview schematic in 15 or 20 years, everything will be IT, everything will be cloud-based, and so on. Our business is to make sure that we are not going too fast on a road that will not deliver value to us, cost money. Our business is, of course, as a media group, technology is key. Technology is not something that we will subcontract to somebody else. It's key to our business. It doesn't mean we are not going partnership with people, of course, and more than ever, but technology is key. So with that in mind, we have just to make sure that we are taking the good decision to be innovative, to be agile, and so on. But at the same time, what will be different in news in 5 years that will make my news bulletin more successful? Cloud? Not sure. Could be. And this is the key question. Am I making more audience every evening because of cloud? Telco had more impact in the recent years because of 4G aggregation and live view, AVWest, TVU, Jazeera technology that really gave us a lot of flexibility to report from the field more than the cloud. But I'm sure that the next one will be around cloud more than around telco. I expect more from cloud now. The last 3-4 years, 4G was a key enabler for us. Probably cloud will be the next one.
So for now, we stay on premises.
No, really, we on project by project, we have to answer private, public, on-prem, depending also on the risk. Sometimes we will start on cloud to make sure that we will not lock capital investment for some project. And if the business is good, then we can come back on-prem because it's worth investing instead of buying as a service. But the first year, we don't know what the business could be. And so in this case, it could be very practical to go on cloud. So.
Thank you. So guys, as we are running out of time, I would like to ask last final question to each one of you. So over the span of next 10 years, in brief, how you envisage what's going to happen and how the media industry will use cloud in this time span?
I'll go ahead and give it a first go. I think as an industry, remember, cloud itself is not so much an IT decision. It is very much a business-oriented decision. You heard it here. It's a balancing act between the risk to the business, how many nines do you want, versus the OpEx, CapEx balance. And from that perspective, you know, as you said at TF1, technology is mission critical to the business. They're not going to completely offshoot everything off-site. And then as Al Jazeera also highlighted, which a lot of people forget, cloud is not cheap. It is actually a variable cost. It does become expensive over time. Leverage it wisely for what you need it, i.e. the spikes. But if you know that you're going to need a certain technology infrastructure and it will be consumed over time, it doesn't make sense to put it on something that is a variable cost. So we don't see a lot of people, you know, hybrid cloud is here. It is here to stay. We live in a multi-cloud world today, and customers are investing in both. And our experience is that that is probably going to stay stable for a while.
Okay, let me take a slightly different perspective and provide an overview of how we see the media industry evolving and how cloud plays a role in it. Right, so with the rise of what we call FANG, which is Facebook, Amazon, Netflix, and Google, and more recently Apple getting into the content production space, I believe there's an existential threat being posed to traditional content companies or content creators and such. Let me explain why. So if you look at the FANG entities, what they're doing is they're increasingly getting into content production, they're already into distribution, and they're creating audience silos. And what they're doing is basically they're disintermediating the audience from the traditional content creators. So they're basically learning about how users consume content, what content they like, and using that information to influence their own original content production, which in turn is winning Oscars and Golden Globes against the traditional content companies. So, and given the fact that these entities are not willing to share the audience data because their business is built around keeping the data and monetizing that information, the content companies need to digitally transform in the new era and the new digital era with these new digital disruptors. And this is where I believe the cloud comes in. And from a production workflow perspective, I think there will always be a combination of hybrid, which is on-prem and public cloud. But where I think the public cloud will going to be more impactful is when it comes to audience analytics and artificial intelligence. So I think this is where leveraging the cloud to use the additional insights about audience and AI will help these content companies to first go establish a direct-to-consumer channel. Because if they cannot be completely beholden to these FANG entities and then continue to thrive in their business. So they will need to have, of course, they cannot completely give up these channels. They need to have a direct-to-consumer channel as well, and over a period of time, create more of these audience that are available in the silos, create teaser contents and such, and then bring them over to their owned and operated sites. And so that they can help further engage and monetize. So I think this is where I see the media industry evolving and cloud playing a critical role in helping these media companies digitally transform themselves from a traditional content creation company into more of a creation and a distribution company. And this is where we believe that Microsoft is very well positioned because unlike all these other entities, we are not in the media business. We are not competing with the media companies, but we are looking at empowering these media companies with our cloud platform and our ecosystem of partners to help them grow and thrive in the business.
I think this is very good wrap up in this. So, Ken, if you just want to one thought for the end.
Yeah, I'd just add to that, which is I think, you know, cloud is a tool at the end of the day. And I think as we look out over the 10 years, we'll see, you know, as the example was given, people validate stuff as a service in public cloud, you know, then based on the business value, you'll bring it on-prem, you won't kind of thing. And everything, you know, that we look at in terms of metrics today, you know, we'll look back on in 10 years and go, boy, we blew through all of that kind of thing over the time. And the other piece, which ties into what Sudheer said, is analytics, yeah, which is having the analytics into your system, whether it be on, you know, audience measurement and what content should be generated and what's being utilized, but also on how the network infrastructure is being utilized as well, both in terms of, you know, your data center utilization, your application utilization across all of that, which allows you to continue to optimize as you go forward.
Thank you very much, guys. So now we have a time to take a couple of questions from the floor. So please feel free to ask our general manager from Al Jazeera. So we have one gentleman.
Test 1, 2.
Many people, and I believe I am one of them, thought that it's a satellite or something, because it has to be in the sky if you are talking about cloud. And since you cannot put, you know, data in the clouds themselves, then it must be something in the sky. Of course, now, I mean, I have my my colleagues here, and including Yassine, who explained things to me, even though, I mean, I guessed it was huge computers and stuff like that. Now, so one of the problems maybe that is facing a clear understanding, an easy understanding of what is a cloud is the name itself. So I remember the cloud from the old times, the Greek dramatist Aristophanes, when he wrote a play called The Cloud to mock Plato and Socrates, because he thought these people were thinking back in the sky like in the cloud, while the new generation wants people to think realistic. So it comes to here. A lot of people think of the cloud as something in the sky, as you said. But it was interesting to hear that. I think it's better explained when you say that cloud is not a place, it's not a space, it is a business model. And that's when we understand that it is a business model, then we have to think about our business model compared to, well, or how it could work with this cloud as a business model. I believe that makes it much easier. Thank you very much for mentioning that.
Thank you very much. If I could add to that, a lot of people forget that when you want to be able to look at cloud, people often looking to others to see how I should do cloud. The first thing that people need to do that is easy to say, but a lot of people forget. You need to take a look at what cloud means to you. There have been many IT jargons that have come and gone. I'll give you one very simple example that you can all laugh at. ITIL, right? Business processes like that came and everybody would treat this as almost biblical. I have to do it the way the book was written. And people looked at cloud the same way. Now, as we know, cloud is an operating model, and you have to be able to adopt it to how it needs to fit your business needs, right? It's an operating model.
Thank you very much. Do we have any other questions? Please.
Yeah, thank you for the presentation. For Al Jazeera, as technical staff, we need to know from where we can start and when we can start, especially in the production side. Thank you.
I think we need to be quite realistic. My philosophy, if we have presenter, and we need to human person, because human, it's better to talk to the human, not this AI and some robots and all this stuff. Because when human talk with human, they have trust between us. From this perspective, studio will be definitely stay on ground till we are not considering anything in this way. But from the other part, except the studio, we need to move there, because this technology will give us advantage that we can compete with this social media stuff, that our message can go faster to our viewers. And we are already late, Because we see when other, like, I don't know, other media companies who use the social media stuff much wisely and much in bigger scales, they have really high reach to the end users. And from us as old-fashioned broadcasters, we need to leverage this technology, not like cloud, it's now fashion and we go there because we want to just be in the trend. No, we need this cloud because our journalists, like for example, Al Jazeera, it's really fragmented around the globe. We have lots of headquarters, we have lots of bureaus, but this is not a newsroom. We have only 2 or 3 newsrooms, and we want to have the reach to everybody in the world. We need to combine through cloud technology, we need to combine all our bureaus, all our headquarters to the one newsroom. That all these powers we have through the one journalist that he can access to everybody in the world in the shortest periods of the time. And I think this is the ultimate goal of all this cloud story. It's not like that we are running the business the way how we ran before. We need to do it much smarter way because it's the future. You know, it's the way how we run the business before, it's just gone. We cannot do it. Like breaking news, going on air in 1 hour, 2 hours, in Twitter it's already yesterday news. See? Who cares about this? We are not relevant. We need to embrace this technology from the cloud, which Twitter use, that we can go on air in a matter of minutes, seconds, if it's possible, yeah? And then we become really, really important for our end users, our viewers on the end of the day.
Yeah, I think let me try to add to that in terms of your question, I think, if I understood right, is where do I start and what is the right place to start? I think what we have seen work across multiple customers and use cases, I think, is to identify a set of use, because there's no one perfect answer, right? So you need to first figure out, okay, what are first you need to get convinced that, okay, there is value in moving to the cloud. And the best way to do it is identifying some key small projects. Okay, let me try to do some quick POCs, a proof of concepts. And this is where I think what we typically historically have done with customers and partners, we bring in guys like cloud solution architects. They sit with you, they understand your challenges, and then come with a plan. Okay, this is where the cloud can really help you. And they can help you do POCs. And then once you do both economic analysis and the workflow analysis, you say, yes, these are the value that the cloud can add for me, then you can take it to the next stage. And this is how we actually got started with Al Jazeera. We had about 6 projects that we had identified. And we did POCs, like whether it's in the case of newsroom in the cloud, video AI, how it can add rich metadata to media asset management systems, and such. So I think what we could do is basically identify your use cases and identify some small chunks that we can get started with the POC and then build up from there.
Perfect. Thank you very much. So we won't take any more questions, but guys, feel free to talk to our panelists around the event all day. Now it's time for lunch. We're already late. And I was informed that to inform you too that we recollect together at 3 o'clock in the main hall. Right? Thank you very much. Thank you, panelists.